Hello and welcome to the OP Overwatch podcast, a podcast focused on Overwatch strategy, tactics, characters, and general discussion. I'm your host Jam, and I'm joined by my co-host Jeff. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. There's excitement in the air. It's like Christmas Eve, man. We're going to get competitive mode soon.
I know, you've been really excited for this competitive mode. It's something that Blizzard's been talking about for a while, and now that the PTR is out, it seems like people finally have a chance to get their hands on it and really test it out before the full release.
Yeah, I was able to jump onto the PTR myself this past week and get my first crack at the new competitive mode since they've made some changes. And I've got to say, I'm pretty happy with what they've done. I know there's still some people that have some concerns or complaints, but you're never really going to make everyone happy. I'm pretty happy with where it is. So I know you got to jump on there as well. What were your initial impressions?
Well, honestly, jumping in and kind of having a few matches, right off the bat, you could tell that, at least in the matches that I participated in, that everybody seemed to know what they were doing, which is a common problem, not just in Overwatch, but I think in a lot of FPSs and competitive games. When you're trying to go on and, you're worried about your rank or how well you can do, every once in a while you're going to get paired with someone who it might be their first time or their first day or week playing the game, not as familiar with all the maps and all the characters, so they're going to go in and they're just going to have a disadvantage. And that's not necessarily a bad thing or anything that they're at fault for. Everybody starts somewhere, but the nice thing about this competitive mode is that you actually go into it with people who are already pretty familiar with the game, and they are purposely choosing the competitive mode for that reason.
Yeah, I think that you're definitely going to have people that are looking to take it a little bit more seriously, and that's going to be good going forward just in terms of getting people that are willing to play the right role and, people that aren't trying to pick 6 Winstons or whatnot. So I jumped on the PTR, and the first thing I noticed when I got in there was golden weapons are in. I know we talked on our last episode that there was going to be some skins coming to weaponry. They didn't waste any time with that, so it looks like there's one in for every character, and it costs 300 competitive points, which seemed to be 300 wins from what I experienced on the PTR playing this competitive mode. You got 1 point for every victory, so that's a good amount of time. I don't know if that could change. I mean, if you could earn extra points for season totals or things like that. But right now, it seems like that's going to be a good amount of time put in, so definitely something that when you see someone with a golden weapon, they earned it.
Now, with the golden weapon, is that something where you can only purchase that weapon for that character that you've been playing, or you use the currency to buy any weapon that's available? Because I feel that if you saw someone that had a golden weapon, with a specific character, then you would know, oh, this guy is really good with that specific character. Unless, either way, if you are buying the weapon, chances are it's for a character that you play a lot anyways.
Yeah, it looks like you can make the purchase yourself, so you could choose to buy the weapon for someone you don't ever play, but I don't think many people are likely to do that. So most of the time, when you see it, it's probably going to be a character they're pretty decent with, I would think. So just jumping in, the first thing I noticed after the golden weapons, when I went to actually start playing some games, there was a tutorial on there, kind of a how it works screen that just kind of walked through like when the season's going to end, some of the perks that might take place, and it kind of explained how they're going to do the 10 placement matches. What did you think about that tutorial? Did it seem sufficient to you? Do you think players are going to have any confusion about how to get in and how to get started?
I actually really liked it. Initially, when I heard about the competitive mode, I was hearing about it on forums and different people talking about it, and everybody seemed to explain it, a slightly different way, and initially it sounded pretty confusing, but it's literally about 2 screens that just show you exactly how the competitive mode is going to work, how you get your skill rating, how the matches work, and, it's going to be the best of a certain amount. So I thought it was pretty straightforward and pretty classic Blizzard to just take this and make it come down to the very bare bones basics and easy to understand right off the bat.
Yeah, it seemed like they really wanted to let you just jump in and get started, which is cool. They gave you the important, necessary information, and then you just go from there. So they start you out with 10 placement matches, and then at the end of the 10 matches, you're rewarded a skill rating. There's still some debate out there in the community as to whether the skill rating is based only off of your record or if it's stats within the game. I think there's pros and cons for both of those possibilities. And so until we get confirmation, I'm not sure. But, I mean, obviously one of the key ingredients in Overwatch is the team play aspect and promoting that. And so if you start getting a situation where the skill rating is being awarded for individual stats, I mean, A, that kind of goes against the goal of Overwatch, and B, you're going to get your placement matches with, 3 Widowmakers on your team, or I mean, I guess it's not that big a deal because obviously once you get your skill rating, then it will go up or down based on how you actually play and whether you're winning with your team. But just to get started with it, it seemed like it would be counterintuitive to promote individual stats. But on the other hand, if you're queuing up for your placement matches by yourself, you don't really have that much control over whether your team wins or loses. I mean, you can play great, and if you get put with 5 people who are not taking it seriously, you're going to be 0-10, and it's not really your fault. So I see both sides of it.
Well, right off the bat, I think that the idea of having a skill rating is something that's truly competitive in a game like Overwatch that's team-based. It's going to be a lot different from most other games because, as you said, your skill is going to be based on, how well you do in the team. But if you base it simply off of wins and losses, I mean, it's very possible, and it's happened to everyone, where you might be doing a great job, you might even be carrying your team, but if you lose it, what is your skill rating going to be based off of? You doing your very best, losing, and then your skill goes down. So for them to do it based off of maybe your stats that are in-game, the ones that you see at the end of a normal match, how much you've healed, how many kills you've gotten. I feel that Overwatch has enough parameters within the game that it measures to kind of base your skill off of that as well. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting system, definitely a complicated system, and it's one of these things where I think them doing the PTR and testing out what's going to work best, what's going to keep the community happiest, is going to be an interesting path that they're going to follow. And I feel that there will be a lot of tweaks and changes throughout the life of this competitive mode.
Yeah, there have actually already been some changes, but we'll get to that in a few minutes here. So I just wanted to quickly share my experience because I know that there had been some concern about assault maps specifically with the previous format. And so their solution to that was to add this time bank system. And so my very first match, in my first placement match, I got in and I got into the time bank system on Temple of Anubis, and it was awesome. I mean, we swapped. I started on defense, then went to offense, then went back to defense, and finished on offense again. It was a really close match. Everyone took it really seriously. I mean, my first impression of the competitive mode was just epic, off the charts. I mean, this was sort of the solution. I mentioned before that we didn't have details on how they were going to fix Assault, but I think they fixed it, and it seemed like a lot of fun, even though it does prolong matches a little bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to kind of balance it out. I do love how it kind of switches that time over from round to round. My first match was actually on Numbani. We were doing a payload push, and I gotta say, just jumping in, it was efficient. We immediately got in. Everybody knew we were on the clock and had to get there as quickly as possible. And there was a lot more communication in the chat log than I generally see on just the regular quick play. So that being said, I think that it's going to definitely open up a chance for growth for a lot of players. And also, I did want to clarify as well for people that may not be as familiar with the competitive mode or the new skill rating. Your skill rating and your rank are two completely different things. Your rank is, if you play Overwatch now without the competitive mode, that's what you're used to. And a lot of people, I think in many games, kind of attribute your rank to your skill level. It's like, oh, he's a high rank. He's been winning a lot. But the reality of this is that the rank means you've been playing a lot. So you could lose multiple matches and still get a high rank. But, you're going to get a higher rank faster if you're doing better at the game. However, with your skill rating, as Jeff said before, it's going to be able to go up and down. So there's going to be a lot more pressure to keep that up and do well in the matches as opposed to, whatever, we lost the match. Better luck next time. At least your rank will go up.
Yeah, so if you see someone with a 1 skill rating on the other team, it's not that they're new, it's that they're bad.
Yeah, and that is something that hopefully won't happen after, and that's got to be a bad run for that particular player. Now, isn't there a minimum rank that you need to be in order to even compete in the competitive mode?
Yeah, I believe the minimum rank to start competitive play is rank 25. And that's probably a good thing to have on there, just so that you don't get someone who bought the game and logs in for the first time and either accidentally clicks on it or is just feeling brave, and it ruins the experience for other people as a new player is trying to learn characters. This is not really supposed to be the training ground or the place to experiment with a character. So I think it's probably good that they put some sort of requirement on there. And rank 25 does not take long to get if you're playing the game a decent amount. So it's not too much to ask, I don't think.
No, not at all. And what I find interesting is that this is actually a way for Blizzard. They already do a lot of looking at the data and the stats that come through. You know, obviously it's their server, so they can look at most played characters, most kills, most deaths, and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see the difference in these stats when comparing your non-competitive games to the competitive ones. And I'm wondering if they're going to use this, you know, as alongside a lot of the high-level tournament matches that we've been seeing online to kind of keep the game balanced and make future tweaks and patches.
Yeah, for sure. I think they are always aware in tracking that information, and I don't think they make decisions, particularly about character balance, lightly. So they're going to use all the resources available, and that's definitely going to be one of them. So another thing that I noticed right off the bat, my first game loading in, that is pretty awesome, they are now showing pre-made groups on the UI before the match. So when you first load in, it shows you both teams. And as I mentioned, I was just queuing up by myself to test this out on the PTR. But if there was two people that grouped together and joined, or four, or you know, a full six-man team, like it would show you who grouped up ahead of time. So you know what you're up against, and if they're on your team as well, you know. And I don't know if it necessarily would change how you play it, but I think it's really cool to have that knowledge. And of course, it also is going to show you everyone's skill rating, but the pre-made groups I wasn't expecting, so I was happy to see that. I think transparency is the way to go here, and so the more knowledge, the better. Another thing that I noticed, there appears to be a XP penalty and potential suspension from competitive play for leaving matches. I think that's probably a good thing, but I hope that they are lenient enough for real-life situations. I mean, it is a game, so you got to kind of find that balance. You want someone to take it seriously and not queue up if they don't have time to finish a match or leave if they're upset or if they're losing. But you also don't want someone who is having something going on in real life and has to leave, and then when they do finally get a chance to relax again, they can't play.
No, and that's very important because I think having a penalty is going to kind of avoid, you know, there's always people trying to game the system. So, you know, if you have a group of people working together to try to get their skill level up and intentionally go against other players that are going to quit, there is going to be a penalty for that, losing your XP. So I think that is important. But I do agree with you. I think that taking it lightly and maybe not going too harsh, because there are reasons, you know, sometimes get a phone call or you have to go to work or for whatever reason your computer shuts down. These things do happen. I think the problem comes when it's consistent. You definitely have a scenario where if someone's continually quitting out of the game every time they start to lose a match, I mean, that is your quintessential rage quitter, and we don't want that in the game. We're not going to be able to get rid of it completely, but anything you can do to kind of balance it out and kind of push people away from doing that, just stick it up, finish the match. How are you going to get better if you don't lose every once in a while?
Sure, yeah. And as I mentioned before, they have all this information in front of them. So certainly if someone's a rage quitter or is making a pattern of it, that's the situation where I think that these penalties and possible suspensions should be enforced. But, as long as they're understanding and lenient with IRL situations, then I'm totally cool with this because it will improve the quality of matches. So even though the PTR was only up for a few days, they were really paying attention and made some changes based on feedback just within that short period of time. So there was another developer update from Jeff Kaplan just within the past couple of days, and he just kind of touched on the feedback that they're getting and actually some short-term changes that they're going to be making right away before this thing goes live with the next patch. So he said that people are extremely happy with most of the changes, which sort of echoes what I was thinking, and with this time bank system, I'm pretty impressed. I think it seems like some people are still pretty unhappy with sudden death, and especially the coin flip mechanic that they added. So my understanding is that the old sudden death in like the closed beta competitive mode was always resolved on a control point map in a single round, and I guess that drove some people nuts because they were playing a payload or an assault, and then they have to decide the winner on a control point. But that does seem like the most fair. You don't have one side attacking and one side defending. I think control points are probably... I think that it probably started that way for a reason. I think they looked at it from the get-go and thought that's the most fair way to resolve it. So now, because people were unhappy with the control point, they have sudden death on the map that you were playing before, whether it's a payload or assault or hybrid, and they do a coin flip, which is supposed to randomly select which team plays attack and defense. And so naturally, people are losing their minds about this now. It's funny because the stats pretty much show that it's 50-50 with the timers that they've got in place, but people still are convinced that there's an advantage to one side or the other. So that's something they're just going to have to keep struggling with, I think. In the long term, they're actually talking about removing it altogether now, but they can't do that and still get this mode out anytime soon. So all they did was shorten some timers, and that's why he gave the update.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the current system and how it exists now is going to do for this season. And, you know, what's nice about this is because the competitive mode does work in seasons in which, you know, you're going to be able to compete over a specific amount of time and then the season's over. They can always make changes to future seasons and kind of use this almost, you know, it's the first time competitive mode is out, so it could be almost some sort of test run. But it's a tricky road to follow because you're going to have people in the community that are, you know, there's always going to be people that are happy with how things are. There's going to be people screaming about change. Some of them are, it's a matter of opinion, but some of them are seemingly reasonable arguments. Some of them seem unreasonable. You know, it's just like people that are going to complain about anything. And trust me, those people are out there complaining about things being overpowered or, you know, oh, this character has a better chance on this map. No, well, maybe you just lost with that character in that map because I've seen other people play that character as well and do much better. But it's hard to say because a lot of the times they may have a point. Maybe there are certain advantages. The interesting thing about Overwatch and the tricky thing about Overwatch is that so many factors go into one match. You know, it's a 6v6. You're hitting different maps. You're on attack and defense. You have 21 characters currently. So there's a lot of factors to consider. So to just boil it down to, oh, you can't win with, you know, on defense on this point with these certain characters, brings it down to a very specific nature that's hard to test. So I think the best way to test it is just to throw it out there, have people go and kind of look at the results. And that seems to be exactly what Blizzard is doing.
Yeah, that's why they just made these small tweaks to the timers instead of trying to go back to the drawing board again with this. They want to throw it out there, run the first season, and essentially we're all going to be guinea pigs, which I'm totally fine with because the best way to really get a feel for how things are playing and how people are reacting is to put it out there and make adjustments from there. So they're going to stick to the schedule with this summer season starting on time, and then down the road they are talking about probably removing the concept of sudden death altogether. But what's funny about that is it's not something that's happening all the time. I mean, they said right now they're seeing sudden death 9% of the time in Assault, about 17% in Escort, and somewhere in the 20s, like 20 to 29% on hybrid maps. And I'm guessing from reading into it that they want it to be somewhere around 10% for all formats. So I think in the short term they might tweak some timers again to try and get that down on certain formats. But people are freaking out over something that's not occurring that often. And because of it, I think what we're going to end up seeing is they're going to remove sudden death and people are going to start getting draws. And that to me, I mean, just, you know, being a pretty serious gamer myself and knowing many others, the concept of a draw is just not something I can envision being well received. Gamers need to feel like they're awesome. And when all 12 people see draw pop up on their screen, all 12 people are going to feel like they lost. So, I mean, I think the people that are rioting over the sudden death might want to consider the alternative we're going to get. But what can you do? It sounds like it's already in motion now.
I thought you were a fan of soccer. What's wrong with the draw?
I mean, a draw is fine in soccer because the team that was losing and pulled the draw off feels like they won. But soccer players are not gamers. Gamers need not only to see victory on their screen, but to know that they were responsible for that victory and to have the stats to back it up, and then they need to tell everyone about it. So I just don't see how that's going to make anyone happy when they see draw on their screen. I could be wrong. I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
It's hard to know how you deal with a sort of a tiebreaker because it seems no matter what you do, someone might not be happy with it. So do you have any ideas of, and I'm talking like just go crazy, like what they could do to potentially come up with something creative? Like I'm thinking in this, and I'm the master of terrible ideas, so don't take this seriously at all. But something like just jumping into a match, and if you die, you don't respawn. Sudden death is literally sudden death. If your character dies, you don't come back, and then could even be almost a free for all of like whatever team's left on the map. That's how it happens.
Yeah, that's funny actually, because I was thinking about this the other day, and that is one possibility that rolled into my head, is just like Counter-Strike, like a real death match where when people die, they're dead, and they just go to spectator mode and watch their teammates. And I mean, that's one way to go. There's always, pretty much any format they come up with, there's going to be people that complain about it. I mean, I've made no secret of the fact that I'm a fan of the control point maps, but I don't think there was anything wrong with the original one-round control point. If you don't think that it's fair to resolve it on a different map, I mean, I don't know how that really matters that much, but maybe that Blizzard could come up with a sudden death only map, like a Final Destination from Smash or something, where it's just really level and people can duke it out. I don't know. Maybe they go to control point and everyone starts with their ultimates up, or ultimates charge 50% faster or something. I don't know. I don't need to be in there all day. Just tell me who won. So I don't know. I mean, there's not really any solution that's going to make everyone happy, but I just hope they don't cave to a few loud people who are upset when the majority of the community is okay with it. Oh,
I really like the idea of the match starting with everybody with their ultimates. Can you imagine, 12 characters coming out, they meet on the point, and all of a sudden 12 ults go off at the same time? I mean, I would love to see that. I don't even know if we could handle that type of intensity in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be phenomenal to watch, and then the team that loses would say that this mode is stupid and doesn't require any skill, when it could be argued that your team comp and positioning is more important than ever in that scenario. So I don't know. Again, you're not going to make everyone happy with it, but as it stands, the only changes they're making in the short term before this thing comes out is they dropped some timers on like the assault and escort and hybrid. I think they were working off of 5-minute timers from the get-go, and they've dropped those to 4. And then when it goes to sudden death on those map types, instead of 2 minutes, they're at 1:45 now. And I guess they think that small adjustment is going to balance out and hopefully calm some people down. But I mean, I think the problem is still just that they're going to see a coin flip and then freak out if they perceive that they've lost the coin flip.
I guess time will tell, and the response in the community, and hopefully they find something that's going to be as fair as possible. But no matter what you do, someone's going to like it, someone's going to hate it. But, I trust in Blizzard to go with the option that's going to be the most fun for everyone.
Yeah, and I think all eyes are definitely on this competitive mode coming out. With the rise in esports and the popularity of gaming, I think people are anxious to see if this is the next esport. So I'm hopeful. I mean, Blizzard certainly knows what they're doing with these launches and with balancing characters and things like that. So they'll work it out, and we'll definitely continue to discuss and cover as this thing evolves.
So that was a brief overview of the competitive mode coming to Overwatch. What do you guys think? Do you think there's a better way to settle the ties in these sudden death matches? Do you have a better idea? Crazy or not, let us know in the comments.
If at first you don't succeed, blow it up again!
So Junkrat is a very, very interesting character because, man, he is just oozing with personality. He is, in my opinion, very clearly a bad guy, but not a bad character to play. He has a lot of interesting abilities that I feel sets him apart from a lot of the other characters. And he can pretty much be seen as your quintessential grenade launcher character, which I feel is very exciting for people who are fans of grenade launcher type weapons in other FPSs.
Yeah, Junkrat's one of my favorites. He's a funny dude. He's very much the Joker of Overwatch. In fact, I thought that before I knew that he has a legendary skin that is essentially the Joker. So it's very fitting. I guess they're on the same page, me and Blizzard. But yeah, I mean, he's a defense character, but really his damage output, his ability to dish out punishment is off the charts.
For sure. And yeah, that Joker-type persona definitely comes through both on offense and defense because he's constantly cracking jokes. He has a lot of energy, and he's very clearly a psychopath. I will say I'm not particularly a huge Junkrat fan. However, I see the usefulness in a team with Junkrat because going against many Junkrats, he is quite honestly one of the most frustrating characters, in my opinion, to fight. There's a lot of different ways of playing him, but all of them seem to be completely enraging if you're trying to fight him with someone else.
Oh yeah, he'll drive you nuts. He hurts. I mean, the grenades do 120 direct damage if he hits you with it, or like up to 80 if it hits you with the splash. So they hurt a lot. I mean, one direct hit and one indirect will kill most characters in the game. And so the way the grenades work, they actually explode after 3 bounces unless you get a direct hit with it. So being aware of that, I mean, you can kind of angle the way that you're using it to bounce grenades towards people or over things, because it's always going to be the 3rd bounce when it actually explodes unless you hit them right in the face with it.
Yeah, Junkrat's frag launcher is definitely a weapon that should not be taken lightly. Like you said, that direct hit of 120 is pretty intense because, kind of to put that in perspective, Tracer, her full health bar is 150 HP. So to have almost all of your life taken out in one hit is pretty brutal. On top of that, you know, he can shoot them one after another, and he doesn't have to be close to you, even though he's very dangerous at close range. With Junkrat, you generally want to be with his frag launcher, medium to long range, to kind of keep yourself at a safe distance while doing the ultimate amount of damage. So that's his frag launcher. He also has some other very interesting and chaotic abilities that kind of fit with his personality. He has his concussion mine, which is one of the more odd abilities I've seen in this game because it's a mine that he can kind of drop down and then set it off remotely, but it has some pretty interesting effects.
Yeah, the mine is really, really useful. I mean, as you mentioned, he's really more of a medium-range character, ideally. The ideal situation for Junkrat is to sit behind your team and just lob grenades at people all day. But if somebody does try and close distance on him, his abilities are really, really good at either getting him away or bursting people down. The concussion mine will do 120 damage if it hits somebody. So usually if someone rushes you, you just want to throw it out and then immediately detonate it while it's still in the air. I mean, 120 damage right off the bat, and then you just have to hit them with one grenade and they're done. So the mine is really good for that, but it's also really useful to propel Junkrat himself. It doesn't do any damage to you, but it does launch you. So whether you're just trying to get in a good position before the match starts or trying to get away from people, trying to get away from ultimates, you can just launch yourself out of a danger zone with your concussion mine. So it's really, really useful.
Yeah, and it's important to note, too, that the concussion mine can not only launch you, but other enemies in other directions as well. Although it does do damage when it launches them, so it's just one of those benefits to being Junkrat is for whatever reason you don't take damage from your own mines. And his other ability beyond that is the steel trap. So this ability is highly useful for Junkrat because where he might be a little more vulnerable at close range, you know, unless you can get some of those very short-range direct hit with the grenade launchers. He doesn't have a whole lot of HP, though. He just only has 200, which is a solid amount, but, compared to some other characters, he can go down quickly. He's not a tank by any means. So his steel trap is extremely useful for characters that want to get close in, like Reinhardt, and take him out in a couple hits. It's a giant metal tooth trap that he can just drop on the ground, and if an enemy gets too close to it, walks over it, it clamps on them, and it does damage, and it immobilizes them for a short amount of time. So they can actually be completely stuck in the area that they walked on the trap, and not be able to move at all.
Yeah, the trap is really effective. Does 80 damage, so a common combo is to throw your trap down and your concussion mine down on the same spot, and then it'll actually alert you on your UI when the trap is activated. So then you just right-click to set off your concussion mine, and you've done 200 damage, and you've probably killed somebody and didn't even see them on your screen, potentially. So it's a really cool, effective way to block off flanks or other avenues of attack also, because it gives you that alert when it goes off or when it's destroyed. So if you're trying to watch one side of a point or one entryway, you can throw your trap down on another one and essentially be covering two, because you know that one way or another they're either going to get caught in it or destroy it, and you're going to know that there's someone there. So yeah, the trap is excellent, and as you mentioned, it locks somebody down if they do actually step on it, where it'll do the 80 damage, and then you just fire one grenade at them, and you've done 200 damage, and they can't move out of the way, so a direct hit's going to be easy.
Similar to Widowmaker's Mine, one of the great things about that ability is that if you do have a spot that you're kind of sniping from with the grenade launcher, you have a little bit of reassurance that if it's something that you feel you might get flanked, drop a trap down. If you're getting flanked, you're going to see that triggered icon, and you're going to be able to stop them in their tracks, literally. Between his concussion mine and steel trap, the cooldown on the concussion mine is 8 seconds, and on the steel trap is 10 seconds. So they refresh pretty often, and you're going to be able to use them quite a bit, especially that concussion mine, something that you can set off immediately at any time. So 8 seconds is not a long time to wait to be able to use that ability again.
Yeah, it feels like it's up every time you need it. It's pretty fantastic. He is such an interesting character. I feel like these abilities are really a good example of what they are looking for with Overwatch because of the depth to them, the multiple uses, and just different ways to be creative with them. So I think that they're probably really pleased with the job they've done with Junkrat and his abilities. Another ability that he has that most characters don't have anything like this, it's called Total Mayhem. It's basically a passive ability. When Junkrat dies, he drops a bunch of grenades. Of course he does. And they explode for 60 damage each, which is a total of up to 300 damage if someone's standing directly on your corpse when they explode. So I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but this ability seeks me out. Every single time I'm fighting a Junkrat, I die to this. Every time. I'll be fully aware of it, and it just hunts me down. I'll run around a corner, and someone on my team will have killed a Junkrat, and I'll just run right into a pile of grenades. Every time.
Yeah, when you kill Junkrat and that Total Mayhem ability kicks in, those grenades come down, especially with some of the less mobile characters, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You pretty much have to be aware of it ahead of time. If you know you're going to kill Junkrat, you better start backing up ahead of time, because 300 damage is no joke. Just to put it in perspective, Zarya, which is a tank, has 400 total health. So if you've taken over 25% damage with Zarya and kill Junkrat and you're standing right over him, you will die as a tank. So that being said, most of the other characters in the game, that's an insta-kill if you're not being careful. So it kind of lends to the explosive character of Junkrat being all about the mines and the frag launchers. Even when he dies, he is causing explosions. So you have to be very, very careful. That Total Mayhem is ridiculous. And that leads us to his ultimate ability, which I've been avoiding this whole time because it is the bane of my Overwatch existence. We're talking about his Rip Tire, and appropriately named RIP Tire. This ability is bonkers. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, if you see a Junkrat on the other team, you should probably turn your volume up. This ability is super deadly, and super loud. The radius on it is probably larger than most people think it should be, but you can usually hear it coming. So it's only got 100 health. You can actually kill the Riptire before it gets to your team if you're brave. So it's something that it's really kind of a risk-reward thing, because if you get it killed, you know, your Riptire does no damage. So you got to start to be creative, try and pick your spots. It's really awesome to use it from an elevated vantage point where you can just drop it down on people. They're almost never going to shoot it out of the air in the short amount of time it takes to fall. So you got to get tricky with it and just try and make it so that it can't be anticipated. There is a little bit of a trick where you can run the Riptire against a wall and it'll dampen some of the sound. So you can kind of play around with that and see if you can get the hang of it, where you can disguise it until you come around a corner. But yeah, I mean, the other funny thing about it is that he's actually piloting this Riptire, Junkrat is, and so your character is just standing there with his hands over his ears while you're piloting this thing. So you got to be careful, because your character's still on the map, and the other team can just walk up behind you and kill you while you can't fight back or control the character. So just be careful. You know, ideally you'd want to do it, launch the Riptire from a position where your character will be guarded by your teammates, or throw down a trap, or just try and take any precautions you can to survive, so that once you detonate your Riptire, you're not back at your spawn.
Yeah, and some other basics about the Riptire. So for those, if you're listening to this, you're probably familiar with the Riptire, but I'm sure there's a lot of players similar to myself who maybe avoided Junkrat for a while, wasn't really your style, and only know him as an enemy and kind of playing against him defensively. So this is going to be some important information. The Riptire has a duration of 10 seconds. 10 whole seconds. That is a long time for an ultimate to last. He can steer it around. It does 600 damage, which is just insane. It's a huge amount of damage that can, hit everybody in its range. And on top of this, you'd think, oh, okay, well, Junkrat is immobile. I can kill him and we're good to go. But if you kill Junkrat, he still has control of the Riptire even after he dies. So not only can you kill him and then have the worry of the grenades that he leaves behind with his total mayhem, but he also retains control of the Riptire for the remainder of that 10 seconds until it's either destroyed or it kills a massive amount of characters. So this ultimate is no joke. The fact that it is loud, like Jeff said, definitely keep your volume up. Be aware. Blizzard put a lot of work into the sound design for this game, and the sound effects aren't just cool, they also help balance the game. So really listen out for it, and it's one of those things where as it gets louder, you know that it's closer to you as well. It can climb up walls, so it should definitely be considered as a priority the second you hear it.
Yeah, you mentioned it can climb walls. That's really important. It's important to know if you're fighting against a Junkrat, but playing as a Junkrat, it's the same mechanic as Genji or Hanzo's wall climb. So you just hold down your jump button or spacebar on PC, and it's going to just climb pretty much any surface, which is kind of absurd, but it's a really good way to get the drop on people, and so just be aware. But yeah, I mean, kind of jumping into the segment we like to do with these, who do you think that Junkrat is strong against, and who gives you trouble when you're playing Junkrat?
I feel if you're playing Junkrat, the most obvious threats to him are going to be characters that are either a lot more mobile or they stay at a longer range. Your Pharahs, your Widowmakers, people that can be very far away and don't really have to worry about Junkrat's damage-dealing ability at a mid-range. As far as people that are vulnerable to him, I feel it's anyone in his radius. I mean, if you can get close to anyone, and I mean, he does a lot of damage. For a defense character, he's very, very good at just piling on the damage within an area. So characters that are less mobile, like perhaps your Reinhardt or Zarya, if not played correctly, putting up your shields at the right time, can absolutely take a lot of damage from Junkrat. And of course, your other attack and defense characters that are more close range, your Reapers, your Tracer. So I feel ultimately you want to start aiming for a lot of the low HP characters with Junkrat that are grouped together, especially on those payload maps where people generally try to hang around the payload to get it moving, Junkrat is going to be absolutely useful in those scenarios.
When I'm playing Junkrat, I feel like I do really well against Bastions and Torbjorns, just because you know they're going to be stationary for the most part, so it's really easy to land those direct hits with the grenades. Most of the tanks are pretty easy. Again, I mean, kind of the same reason. I mean, their hitboxes are bigger, so it's easier to land direct hits against characters like that. Be aware, we mentioned the grenades are going to detonate after 3 bounces, so if you're going against like a Reinhardt, you can just lob grenades over his shield. If there's a wall behind him, you can just bounce him off the wall, and it'll just hit the wall and then roll up behind him and explode. So you can really give Reinhardt's fits with that. But any tank really, I mean, they're tougher than most characters, but if you're hitting them with direct hits constantly, it's not going to take more than a few to take them down. So he's pretty strong against all characters, but especially against stationary characters and tanks. And then I actually think that Junkrat is the hard counter to Mei, which is important to know because I don't feel like Mei has a lot of natural counters, but Junkrat's really it. I mean, his abilities really do a good job of countering hers. He's stronger from medium range, and if Mei's coming at him with a freeze, he can use his mind to create distance. Same thing with her ultimate. He can use his mind to just launch himself out of that radius for Mei's ultimate. And if Mei does happen to use an ice block, you just walk up and throw a steel trap right at her feet, and as soon as she unfreezes, she's trapped. So there's not really a ton that Mei can do against a good Junkrat. So if you happen to be in a game where you get to go against the legendary 6 Mei comp, go 6 Junkrat. Give him hell. As far as characters he's weak against, I can't disagree at all that Widowmaker, Hanzo, characters like that are good from distance are going to give him trouble just because the grenades do have such a fall-off on their trajectory that it's hard to really get them out there quickly for long distances. And a more exaggerated example of that would be Pharah. There is not a ton you can do to get at Pharah when she's in the air because there's nothing to bounce grenades off of. There's no splash damage. So it's direct hits or no hits at all. So Pharah is definitely the counter to Junkrat. It's just really hard to take one down. I mean, if they get close enough, you can hit him with a concussion mine, maybe. But for the most part, you got to wait for him to land. You only have 200 health yourself, so it's pretty tough to take on a Pharah one-on-one as Junkrat. And then another character that gives me a little bit of trouble, Soldier 76, just because he's so balanced. He can compete from medium range as well. He can heal himself. He can sprint, so he's hard to hit with the grenades. So Soldier's a pretty tough matchup.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on your Mei comment, generally as a Mei player, I like blocking people's ultimates with her ice wall. Doesn't work with Junkrat because it can climb right up that wall. So, yeah, he has a lot of opportunity to just create some mayhem, which is very fitting for his character. Also, as a person who's defending against Junkrat, it's important to note that a lot of Junkrat players will start lobbing frag grenades at you without you even knowing where they are. It's important to watch the red trail that follows a lot of the frag grenades. You can kind of get an idea of the trajectory that the frag grenades are coming from. And then also, if you're in a hallway kind of taking cover, a very small space with a lot of walls, that is absolute heaven for a Junkrat because with that bouncing mechanic that Jeff was mentioning, you can bounce the frag grenades right into the hallway and it'll just bounce around the hallway and create an absolute storm of explosions and death. So it is one of those things where it's going to be easier to fight Junkrat if you're out in the open, and if you're playing as Junkrat, you want to kind of get people into a small space in which you can kind of force them into an area. They're taking massive damage. It's doing splash damage. And I'd like to also agree with you on those turrets. The turrets are, I feel, a big deal for a lot of people. If you're not used to a game that has turrets that are stationary and basically just automatically shoot you without any sort of control from another player, it can be frustrating. And there's a few characters that are hard counters to that. I generally like playing Pharah against the turrets because of her rocket launcher. It's a great way to take them out. but the frag grenade launcher that Junkrat has is a great way to take him out very, very quickly, and while still staying mobile as well. So he's a great counter against anybody who uses turrets, and he's also a great counter against tanks, people that are hiding in hallways. I mean, there's many different ways to play him. I mean, you could even play him as almost a pseudo-sniper. Just stay back, lob him over, and hope that you hit someone.
Yeah, if you're not worried about your weapon accuracy, you can be really effective over the course of a game just by hanging back and just firing mass grenades. Because of the bounces, you can get them around corners, you can get them down hallways, and you can usually take a few people out that you never even saw. So he's really effective and really fun to play. So a few tips that I picked up just while playing Junkrat. One thing that it's kind of a cool trick. You can actually, I mentioned that you can use his concussion mine to launch you or get even more distance if you throw it on the ground and then jump over it and then detonate it while you're jumping. But you can actually do a double mine jump to get even higher. So you can throw a mine down on the ground, wait for the cooldown to come up, then jump over it, launch yourself, and then throw another mine down below you in the air and detonate it again immediately. So Junkrat can use that to get to some of the higher places in the map that you wouldn't think he can get to. Other people probably won't be looking for you there. So you can get creative with that. I mean, we've talked before about how much these maps are kind of like a playground, where they have mentioned repeatedly they want to create maps where you can really explore with the characters, and Junkrat can get more vertical mobility than you would think. So another thing, I mentioned the trap. It's really effective for Reinhardt specifically. He can usually block everything with his shield, but if Reinhardt's just marching at you methodically, just throw a trap down in front of him. He'll walk right over it, and he won't expect it, but all of a sudden he'll be stuck. And at that point, a lot of Reinhardts seem to spaz out and just kind of spin around in a circle, I've noticed. They don't seem to know what to do when they're trapped. It's kind of funny. But another thing it's really good for, actually, is Reinhardt's charge. It'll stop. So the charge, it's kind of a scary move if it's coming at you, but it's not the fastest move. If you see a Reinhardt charging at you, just throw a trap down and just wait for the easy target. But the trap in general, just use it often. I see a lot of players that don't use it. It's so effective, either just while you're backpedaling and someone's coming at you, you can throw it down. I mentioned before using it to guard areas or block off flanks. So just use the trap. It's really, really effective. Another thing I would mention, the trap is great to use with other teammates. So like a Symmetra turret, if Symmetra's setting up a trap room, use the trap in there. Or if you know that your Widow is sniping down, a main road, throw the trap out around a corner and see if you can give your Widow an easy headshot. Just get creative with it.
Yeah, that's definitely something I was going to bring up as well. Using that trap in tandem with other characters' abilities is going to be super helpful. I mean, a mobile target is a target just waiting to take as much damage as possible. So going back to this being a team game, communicate. If you're going to throw a trap down, if there's perhaps a pesky Reinhardt or other character that you want to try to kind of knock out of the match, let people know, hey, I'm going to use my trap on this area. I know that he's going to move there. This is the area the payload is. This is where the health is. If you're playing as Junkrat, it's one thing, but playing with a Junkrat, it's good to communicate with them, because if you have another character kind of paired together and sticking around Junkrat, you can pile on the damage on top of that, and it's a blast to play, no pun intended, but you can also do a lot of damage on top of that between the trap, the concussion mine, the frag grenades, and then also whatever character that you play as a partner as well.
A blast to play. I see what you did there. One last thing on him. We mentioned before his rip tire. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be aware of that. The sound of a rip tire probably haunts your dreams. It's a bit of a PTSD situation sometimes. But
or your nightmares.
Right. But if you hear, ladies and gentlemen, start your engines, don't panic, because that's a friendly rip tire. If you hear fire in the hole, you need to run. The rip tires sound the same, but the voice line that Junkrat yells is different, whether it's a friendly Junkrat or an enemy. So just listen for that. The last thing, this is kind of funny. The rip tires can actually pick up health packs. So I mentioned before you can kill a rip tire. If you're piloting a rip tire and you take some damage and you feel inclined to pick up a health pack in your 10-second window, you do have that option. I can't say that I see this happening a lot in-game, but it's good to know that it's there. I guess you never know if you just happen to be going by one anyway. So just be aware of that. It's kind of a funny little thing that they added. It's kind of like its own character in that way.
That feels completely unnecessary to me. That is actually absolutely infuriating. But no, I mean, it's something you have to be aware of. Guys, if you see a Riptire, please do not panic. Attack it. It's only 100 health. You can take it out. Don't panic. Get rid of it. Don't let your entire team be wasted by a Riptire.
Yeah, but maybe spread out a little bit while you're killing it, just in case.
Yeah, not a bad idea at all. So that was our in-depth character breakdown of Junkrat. If you have any other strategies, stories to share, please let us know in the comments. Let us know of maybe some other techniques that you may have used to win with him, maybe some horrifying Junkrat stories. I know we all have some. But yeah, thank you guys again for listening. Please follow us on Twitter and check out our website, oppodcast.com, for more episode news, videos, and other information on Overwatch. If you like the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon as well. Your support will help us upgrade and improve our hardware and software to bring you a bigger and better podcast. We've been loving the response. Keep sending us your comments, and if you have any other characters or any other sort of topics that you want us to cover, feel free to share it with us, guys. You can reach me on Twitter at HappyJamOP. And Jeff?
I'm at TruthEaterOP.
And thank you guys a lot for listening. We'll see you next time.